Hello, and welcome to Autocrat. I am Vince.
I'm Cassie.
And this is episode 5, Divine Wanderers.
Ooh, wonder what that could be about.
You wonder what that could be about.
Exactly.
Haha. Well, the title for this episode comes from the etymology of the word planet, which in Greek means wandering star, because the ancient Greeks noticed some stars seemed to move across the sky while others were fixed, so this is the planets orbiting the sun.
That's interesting. So some of them were not moving.
Yeah, so the actual stars themselves were fixed in place, but the planets obviously orbit and therefore move, so they seem to change position in the sky across the year.
That's interesting.
So as we mentioned in episode 3, I think it was, this episode is going to be a discussion of the planets and moons of the solar system and where they come from in terms of their names in Greek mythology. We'll do a little competition. I will give you the Latin name, and you have a go at guessing what the Greek name is.
Okay.
The proposed schedule that we have here is that this episode will be all about the planets and moons, then next episode we'll move on to the constellations in the zodiac, and in the episode after that we'll be talking a bit about other constellations and the myths that stem from them. It's a way of getting through a number of myths we might not otherwise have enough time to get into, such as that of Callisto, which we will touch upon here, but was more expanded in the constellations episode. With that said, let's start from the sun and work our way out. So our first planet is Mercury, and can you guess which Greek god Mercury is?
Mercury.
I'll give you a clue.
Yeah.
Winged sandals.
Hermes.
Yes, this is Hermes, Hermes being the son of Zeus and Maia. Now my version of the theogony from the Homeric hymns states that Maia was the daughter of Atlas, and that Hermes was the messenger of the gods, so Hermes is therefore a grandson of Atlas who we dealt with a few episodes ago when he rebelled against Zeus. Now, who is Maia? I haven't brought out that name before, and I'm assuming that isn't all too familiar to you.
Not really, no.
Well, she's the eldest of the 7 Pleiades, who were the children of Atlas, as I said, and a woman called Pleione. Pleione is the daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. Oceanus and Tethys are siblings of Kronos and Rhea, so therefore the uncle and aunt of Zeus and Hera. So we have Oceanus and Tethys, they have a daughter Pleione, she marries Atlas, and they have 7 daughters called the Pleiades, one of which is Maia.
We need to get me a family tree.
Yeah, in future episodes we'll get you a tree. It's a fair point to raise, because we might make a tree as well, I suppose, for specifically the planet and moon related content that will go up on the website, because
Yeah.
I can imagine this gets very confusing for a lot of people. Now, according to mythology, the other sisters are Celaeno, Electra, Taygeta, Asterope, Merope, and Alcyone. These names are just names to drop in who the other 6 Pleiades are, because I know that would annoy some people if we mention one but not the other 6. Next up, we have the planet Venus. Now, who is Venus?
Aphrodite.
Aphrodite, good, said without a moment's hesitation.
That's the goddess of beauty, right?
Goddess of love and beauty, yeah. As we saw in episode 1, in the Theogony, Aphrodite is born from the genitals of Uranos after they are thrown into the sea and they sort of foam up.
Still funny.
Which is the worst birth for the goddess of love.
I mean, it's still pretty funny.
Yeah, I think there are some other interpretations that make her a daughter of Zeus, and I believe we talked about that in episode 1 as well, but this version is the one from Hesiod's Theogony. Now, as a planet, as a quick interesting side note here, Venus has appeal for future settlement because of how similar Venus and Earth are, barring minor things like how thick its atmosphere is and how hot it is due to the runaway greenhouse effect. It has been thought that, although the surface of Venus is very inhospitable, future settlement efforts could revolve around floating cities. So in the sky, hovering at the 50-kilometre mark, where temperature and pressure are a bit more bearable and there's lots of sunlight.
I mean, they can't get flying cars on Earth at the minute. I don't think how they're going to get flying cities on Venus anytime soon.
Well, that's the thing. From what I remember, as long as you get them over there, nitrogen, or I believe from memory, Earth's atmosphere, is actually a lifting gas like helium on Venus. Because of Venus's atmospheric composition being very different. So from memory, from I think it was a Dutch magazine, Science in Focus, from I think 2016 or earlier, so this is a bit hazy, it could be possible to have these cities floating at this mark.
Okay.
Now third, we have the planet Earth, because neither Mercury nor Venus have moons, so we don't need to dwell on them any further. Who is Earth? That might be fairly
Gaia.
obvious. Gaia, good, our prophecy-wielding goddess. Gaia is Mother Earth, and we see a parallel of an Earth Mother and a Sky Father in the mythology of a group known as the Indo-Europeans. Indo-European is the language group that gave rise to other language groups such as Germanic, Slavic, Celtic, Italic, Greek and Albanian, Iranian, Indic, and Lithuanian. So you can see a lot of languages actually come from this one group thousands of years back. The Indo-Europeans migrated into Greece for the purposes of our story in about 3500 BCE, to give you a bit of a sense of scale we're talking about here. The Indo-European pantheon has to be reconstructed from descendant deities such as Zeus, and I imagine that's because these deities were worshipped a very long time ago and the language groups have diverged a lot, so we don't have any original records. However, there's the Sky Father, and I don't know quite how you say this, I think it's Diaus Pita. We've also got gods called Usas, or dawn, Surya, the sun, Agni for fire, etc. This comes from the phenomenon of the Indo-Europeans personifying natural phenomena and the planets. These people observed set laws of nature, and it made sense that the concept of a higher power arose from there. Now, Diaus is the supreme god, although this only seems to be certain as a trait as of the Greco-Roman mythology and later on, and he is the Sky Father, so like we've seen with Uranos. Diaus Pita is also not a lightning god, as this only comes later, so with Zeus being a god of thunder and lightning as well as king of the gods. Sky Father is not very preeminent in the Indo-European mythology, and there are no describing attributes. However, we know that Usas is his daughter, and people such as Surya and the Asvins are his sons or those descending from him. Finally, we have, as I said, the concept of a Sky Father and an Earth Mother, so hence bringing us back to the point of Gaia and, in our case, planet Earth. Tacitus reports that the Germans worshipped Nerthus, or Mother Earth, and central to this religion was a parade in which the goddess was wheeled about. So this is a bit of an interesting tangent about the Earth Mother because we don't really need to dwell on the Earth as a planet any further. Our moon Luna, or Selene, is the daughter of Hyperion and Theia. So Hyperion and Theia are both a Titan and a Titanidy, so they are again children of Gaia and Uranos. Let's head out a bit further now to Mars. And which Greek god is this?
Ares?
Ares, the god of war, that's right. And Ares is the son of Zeus and Hera. Again, as a planet, Mars has been the focus of colonizing thought, and one paper mentions it isn't known yet if this will happen peacefully or otherwise.
What would it happen?
As in by people, I imagine, I only skim-read the paper because it's not relevant for our purposes, but I imagine this is through fighting over territorial claims on Mars.
Of course.
Yeah. Now, Mars has two moons, Deimos and Phobos. Deimos and Phobos, fear and terror, who are his sons by Aphrodite. Phobos and Deimos are...
So, wait.
Yes?
Mars has two moons, Deimos and Phobos, right?
Yep.
And they're the son of Ares.
Yep.
With Aphrodite. That means Mars and Venus were together.
Yep, they are, quite famously in the mythology. Aphrodite is, from what I remember, we'll get into this, married to Hephaestus, the smith of the gods, but quite publicly cheats on him with Ares. As named by a man called Asaph Hall in 1877, Phobos and Deimos are the sons of Ares. Kepler also assigned Mars two moons, although he wasn't able to see them. From what I can remember, they're quite small, basically just asteroids. He did this because Earth had one moon and Jupiter had four, so clearly the pattern of doubling moons every time you get to a new planet struck a chord.
Because that's clearly how randomness works.
Well, in the old days, people, as far as I know, did like the idea there was a hidden pattern in the universe, with the solar system's...
I guess it can be nice to think it like that.
Yeah, the solar system's orbits, the planets within it were, as far as I remember, constructed to be within sort of concentric shapes like spheres or pyramids, etc. Now, a quick clarification here to something we mentioned in a previous episode. Do you remember Harmonia being mentioned as the wife of Cadmus back when Typhon was around?
Yeah.
Well, Harmonia is also the daughter of Ares and Aphrodite, so this is where she comes from. It's not just a random woman.
Okay.
Beyond Mars, we have the asteroid belt.
The first one.
Yep, exactly. And 3/5 of its mass is found within four large bodies: Ceres, Pallas, Vesta, and Hygeia. Ceres is also known as Demeter, and we've met Vesta before as Hestia, so these are two of the daughters of Kronos and Rhea, and the sisters of Zeus.
Nice.
Pallas is also one of the giants who we saw in episode 4, and Hygeia is named after the goddess of health and the daughter of Asclepius.
You would think she's named after the goddess of hygiene.
Well, as far as I remember, hygiene is actually a word that descends from Hygeia.
Nice.
Now, Asclepius was a son of Apollo and Coronis, who was in turn the daughter of a man called King Phlegyas. Asclepius was also a talented healer of various ailments, so these are the largest bodies within the asteroid belt. There are other honourable mentions, such as Juno, or Hera, Hebe, Iris, and Metis. We won't dwell on these here, but I'm sure they're names that will come back if you don't recognise them yet. So we've talked about Hera, but Hebe might not be as familiar yet. We come now to the big behemoths of the solar system, starting with Jupiter. And who is Jupiter? Zeus.
Zeus.
Exactly.
That's the most known one.
Yes. We have 4 moons to address here because they are the big hitters of this moon system, the Galilean moons. When these moons were discovered by Galileo Galilei, he wanted to name them the cosmic stars or the Medici stars. This was in honour of the Medici family, who were his benefactors, so providing him with everything he needed, and specifically Cosimo II, Grand Duke of Tuscany between 1609 and 1620. The Galilean satellites are Io, who you might remember, Callisto, who we haven't really met before, Ganymede, and Europa, who I think we touched upon briefly from memory.
It is quite known.
Yeah. A man called Simon Marius tells us of something Kepler suggested in his book Jovian Worlds in 1614, where he tried 3 systems of naming these moons, so the names weren't settled yet at this point. I won't go through all of them, but the 3rd suggestion comes from Kepler, and I'm going to talk about it because it's the one that stuck. Apparently, Kepler suggested the names when he bumped into Marius at Ratisbon Fair in 1613, so the previous year. He named the moons after those that Jupiter loved. There were 3 women, Europa, Callisto, and Io, and Callisto is also said to be Ursa Major, or the Big Bear. This story comes to us courtesy of Hesiod's The Astronomy, and I won't go into it here, but as I said, there's going to be a separate episode on the different constellations.
So do keep an ear open for that.
Exactly. Europa is said to be the daughter of Phoenix, and Zeus turned himself into a bull and took her to Crete. Gruber has a different opinion that Europa is the sister of Phoenix and the granddaughter of Poseidon by Libya, who is the daughter of Epaphus, you remember who we've mentioned a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Libya married a man who I think is called Agamon. My version of Gruber has a really undefined and shaky quality text in the family tree at the back, so I think it's Agamon, but I'm not sure. And so this is the family tree that Europa springs from, according to this version. Europa and Zeus had 3 sons, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Sarpedon. In his catalogue of women, Hesiod says that Ganymede was the brother of Tros, who we'll get to when we talk about the Trojan family tree, and that Ganymede was taken up to Olympus by an eagle because of his beauty. Now, there are a few different versions of Ganymede's lineage, but we're going to be going with most people, such as Diodorus Siculus and the Iliad, that Ganymede was the son of Tros and had 2 brothers. Cicero also mentions Ganymede in something called his Tusculan Disputations, but stays quiet on what his lineage actually is. But all you need to know, Ganymede is a Trojan prince who gets taken up to heaven because of his beauty. Io was the mother of Epaphus, who we've met before, and the ancestor of Perseus and Heracles, so 2 famous names that we'll come back to in future episodes. With that said, let's leave the Galilean moons behind now, because there was a lot of names thrown at you there. And next up we've got Saturn with a lot, and I mean a lot, of different moons. Now, Saturn is the Roman name for Kronos, Zeus's dad.
Nice.
As we said, we're not going to make a distinction between Cronus the Titan and Kronos the personification of time. We're treating them as one individual, as others have done. We're not going to discuss all of Saturn's moons here, because we'd be here all day, just the Greek-based ones.
How many are there?
How many moons are there?
Yeah.
From memory, something on the order of 60.
Wow.
But this includes various small rocks, I think, that aren't really round moons in our sense of Earth's moon, but just things that are orbiting that are larger than asteroids, or even the same size.
So things like Pluto's size.
Or smaller.
Oh.
First up, we've got Mimas, who is a giant we met back in episode 4, and the same goes for Enceladus. Now, Tethys, Dione, Phoebe, and Rhea are Titanides we met back in episode 1, and moons discovered in the 1600s. Next up, we've got Titan, which is of course a collective designation for 6 of the sons of Uranus and Gaia, as we've also seen before.
Mm-hmm.
The moon Hyperion refers to one of the Titans, as does Iapetus, who is the father of Prometheus, Atlas, Epimetheus, and Menoetius, who died in the Titanomachy. In point of fact, all of these sons, except Menoetius, are also represented in the moon roster, so they're also moons of Saturn. Janus is a Roman god who we haven't talked about before, and he's either a primordial deity from the very beginning who has no parents, or else again a child of Gaia and Uranus. There are also Telesto and Calypso, who are daughters of Oceanus and Tethys, and Helene, who is the namesake of Helen of Troy, who we'll meet in future episodes. You might have heard that name before. Yeah. By the way, Calypso also shows up later in interactions with Odysseus, so put a bookmark in that for now. We will have more to say about Calypso. There's 2 final moons of Saturn we're going to talk about because there's a bit more of a detailed story to the actual gods or individuals involved. First, there's Pan.
Like Peter Pan.
Like Peter Pan, but a lot more mythology and a lot less abducting children from bedside windows in London. Now, Pan is the son of Hermes by a daughter of someone called Dryops. Apparently from birth, Pan had a beard, the feet of a goat, and horns on his head. So apparently the nurse who first set eyes on him ran away.
Yes, you would.
Hermes, by contrast, showed his son to the other gods, and they were all delighted with him, apparently especially Dionysus. And this is why we get the name Pan, which means all in Greek, from what I remember. Finally, we've got Pandora. Now, the original Pandora was the first woman, who, in short, opened Pandora's jar and let the various miseries out into the world.
I know that story.
Yeah, we will, if you like, we can come back to that in a future episode. The story of what many people call Pandora's box.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Now, Pandora had a daughter called Pyrrha by Epimetheus. You remember Prometheus' brother?
Mm-hmm.
Pyrrha then married a man called Deucalion, who was the son of Prometheus, and someone called Pronoea. Their child was also called Pandora, so you've got Pandora, the elder, her daughter Pyrrha, and that daughter's daughter Pandora. We'll call these Pandora the First and Pandora the Second to avoid confusion.
Okay.
I imagine the moon is named after Pandora the First because she's far more famous. Let's leave the ring planet behind once again and head towards Uranus. This is obviously Uranos, the consort of Gaia and the father of the Titans. However, we're not going to spend too long at this planet because it doesn't actually have moons named after Greek deities or individuals. Instead, its moons are named after characters from plays by William Shakespeare and the works of Alexander Pope. With that, 8th is Neptune, and do you know who Neptune is?
Poseidon.
Poseidon, the god of the sea. Now, Neptune's moons are named after minor deities of the sea or after nymphs. This includes Triton, the son of Poseidon, and Amphitrite. Amphitrite, by the way, is one of the daughters of Nereus and Doris, as are the individuals who are the namesakes of the moons Niso, Psamathe, Galatea, and Sao. As a funny aside, Nereus and Doris also had a daughter called Doris, who I'm going to be calling Doris Jr. just because I find it funny. Now, Nereus, to give a bit of clarity to his backstory, is a son of Gaia and Pontus, according to a man called Hyginus, as are Phorcys and Ceto, who we touched on in Typhon's episode. And Doris is the daughter of Oceanus and Tethys. There's also the moon Thalassa, who is the daughter of Aether and Hemera, and Thalassa was the mother of Fish by Pontus, who would be her nephew according to this genealogy. Thalassa is also, by the way, the literal word for the sea, just as Gaia is for the earth.
Yeah.
An example with the names of these two deities would be Panthalassa and Pangaea. So Panthalassa was the sea, when Pangaea was the continent 200 million years ago.
Pangaea was the continent.
Yep. So we're going to skip the rest of the moons because there's way too many of them, and we're mostly just covering the ones that are connected to individuals we've met before, and that I could find genealogies for. Mostly I just ran out of steam at a certain point and thought we don't need to cover all of them. So finally we have Pluto. And who is Pluto?
Pluto is Hades.
Hades.
There's lots of facts. Is it actually a planet?
Yes, this is from memory because I'm not an astronomer, but I think Pluto was downgraded sometime in the early 21st century because of various technical classifications such as has it cleared out everything in its orbit, which it was found not to have done. Now, Hades is obviously one of the brothers of Zeus, as we've seen before. Pluto has 4 moons.
Charon.
First there's Charon or Charon, which both Britannica and Greco-Roman give as the child of Erebus and Nyx from way back in episode 1. This would make Charon the granduncle of Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon. Next, there's Nyx herself, who orbits Pluto along with her son. Filling out the roster, we have Cerberus, the Hellhound, and son of Typhon and Echidna, as we saw in episode 3, and Styx, who is another daughter of Oceanus and Tethys.
We need a family tree.
We need a family tree, yes. So, that deals with all the planets and former planets in our solar system. There is the possibility of a hidden 10th planet, which might be making itself known by disrupting the orbits of objects in the Kuiper belt.
Really?
Yep, this body is known as Planet X.
I didn't hear about that.
I think it was several years ago now in 2016 that
I wonder what the stages only did now.
Yeah, well, we might have to do an update, because if they find it and name it after a Greek deity, we might have to come back to this and say we've got an update.
Nice.
I think I once wrote a paper on it for a school project, and I think I suggested the name Somanus at the time if we found it, but I don't remember what that's in reference to. I might have to put that in the show notes. But as we said, until we've got a name, Somanus or otherwise, we will have to wait until a future episode to update this, because Planet X is still hypothetical. After all, we're not an astronomy podcast, despite what this most recent episode might have you believing. Last to touch on is the Kuiper belt, which is a belt of ice clumps past the orbit of Neptune. Here we have Pluto, which is one of the objects in the Kuiper belt, and Eris, known as Discordia to the Romans, and we will have more to say about Eris when we get to the start of the Trojan War. With that, we've dealt with most of the major objects in our solar system, and what do you think about this ride?
That was very nice.
I found it
a lot of things, like there might be a new planet.
I found it interesting, but a lot of names to try and sort out, because there's many genealogies that had me thinking, okay, well, they're the daughter of, let's say, Nereus. Well, who is Nereus? We haven't talked about him before.
Very true.
So, as we said, next episode we'll be talking about the 12 constellations of the zodiac and the myths behind them, and the one after that we'll be talking about the various constellations and their myths.
How nice.
And after that, maybe we'll actually get back on track with some main narrative, although we haven't decided what the episode after this will actually be.
We'll see.
So that's about all for this episode. As always, thank you for listening, and have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, have a great week, and do get in touch by email or have a visit of our website.
So with that there's nothing more to really be said, and we'll wait for the outro. In the meantime, how are you feeling about this planet journey?
It was very fun. There's lots of planets. I don't remember most of them. I knew some of them.